Let me give you a quick poll. See if you guys can answer a couple questions for me real quick. So curious about your infrastructures. I'm seeing that a lot of people are using definitely a combination of things. Just waiting for one of the presenters to be able to get online. And give it about another 15 seconds. And got a couple more other questions to get us started here. Very interesting. We have a very even spread of people who are using both on-premise solutions as well as from the cloud. So that's very interesting, actually. I kind of expected a little bit of different disbursement. If you don't mind, could you answer this question for me as well? Wow. There's about 45% of you that are using Microsoft Azure, 30% to Amazon. Interesting. 25% of you are using Google. Interesting. So let me ask you the Esri question. I like seeing the yeses. So right now I've got about 80% of you are actually already using Pro. So some of this information is going to be helpful for you as far as converting over into a VDI environment if you have not already done so, or maybe you just need a couple quick tricks to get you through. So we got an 85 to 15% yeses versus nos. That's excellent. All right, well, we are going to get started here. I'm going to take control here. And let's see. And I have a couple different people on the line. We'll get started here. So let me introduce ourselves with a few and then take care of a few housekeeping issues. This is a recorded presentation. It is actively being recorded, and I will be posting it online here shortly after the presentation is available. If you have comments or questions, please use the chat. We will take some Q&A at the very end of this. We will try to address as many questions as possible, and I will keep the webinar running as long as there are questions that need to be answered for as long as I can until they automatically shut us off. The existing blog that you may or may not have seen is listed here. This is where I will do an update. This will have the slides. It will also have the presentation available. This email address that's listed at the bottom is a broad-based email address. You feel free to email us there. And as well, we have our individual email addresses up on screen as needed. Currently, we are waiting on one person still to join in, but I'm going to take care of those roles in the meantime. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Ryan Danzy. I'm a senior product engineer on the Esri Performance Engineering team, we do a lot of the testing and the implementation guidelines and produce the white papers and blogs. We get our hands on the technology and we're able to see if it works. Sometimes we don't see things that we like and we get to play with that at a later time. On the line, I also have Emily Apsey. She is from Nvidia. She's their technical marketing on their technical marketing team, and she has a wide range of experience working with various product lines, running all of the suites of testing that Nvidia runs to be able to get their metrics to be able to showcase how the performance can be improved versus simply using CPU and then adding GPU. I also have Seth Peary, Senior GIS Analyst from Virginia Tech, and he's going to be giving us some actual user experience, and he's been working with AppStream, so we're looking forward to hearing from him here shortly. So why are we doing this seminar? Well, as we are all probably doing right now, we are probably working from home. We are sitting in a room, a living room, or some other part of our home that we weren't accustomed to working in some cases, and our offices have been closed down. We can thank COVID-19, it is what it is. But this has been what is considered a new norm for so many people, and we're either getting used to it or we're having to find ways to get used to it. This is where we found that we think the cloud gives a lot of options. It can support our needs for ArcGIS Pro. It can support our needs for ArcMap. It can give us some of the basic functionality that we don't always have and that we can't always make use of. So in the past, I was on another webinar and it involved working from home and the different options that people have been able to take and make use of. Using a cloud-hosted VM, this is what we're going to spend most of our time here speaking to. So I won't go too much into that as of yet, but other options out there. Remote connections to the office, VPN and work by hitting your existing work or office VM or machine. In some cases, VMs because of on-premise solutions. Some people are Mac users and they're running Parallels, or they can use VMware has a product line, but it doesn't handle the support or doesn't support ArcGIS Pro at this time. But Parallels gives you the option to run a Windows VM on your Mac, and you're able to get all that same functionality. For some people that were Mac users and used Office resources, this gives them that flexibility to just take their MacBook home and be able to do their work. And as I mentioned a little bit, on-premise solutions with a VPN. If you're using a Citrix environment, a VMware environment, Hyper-V, Nutanix, there are ways to make it to where that is presented outside of your office. But most of the time, all of your data center is strictly internal. And if you don't have that external functionality, you will be using your VPN and some other features. Again, we won't be spending too much time talking about that today. We're going to be focusing on the cloud. So what makes ArcGIS Pro so much different? I always go into this slide because it helps to give an understanding of why we do what we do on the performance engineering team. ArcMap was released in 1999. You've got a 32-bit architecture. It doesn't have the same capacity for RAM. It has up to 4 gigabytes of RAM capacity, and it's not able to handle running 3D projects. ArcGIS Pro, it was released in 2015. You've got a .NET 64-bit application taking advantage of the latest technology with state-of-the-art rendering and able to render 3D imagery. This is also able to run multiple sessions on a single machine and multiple layouts on a single and just in a single window. This gives you a lot more flexibility, whereas with our ArcMap situation, we weren't able to do that. We have a lot more going on with this. You could almost say it's kind of like playing Pac-Man or playing Call of Duty. You've just got something that's much more capable, much more going into it. And because of the nature of the application, it gobbles up resources much faster and requires a lot more to it. So in this case, we need a GPU in the back end to make all of this happen. And there's multiple reasons why. The role of the GPU.
I'm gonna go. Okay, thanks.
The role of the GPU with ArcGIS Pro, there's a few pieces in this beyond just our 3D rendering. 3D rendering is a strong component to what we do with ArcGIS Pro. However, you also have spatial analytics tools. You have the slope, aspect, viewshed 2, and detect objects using deep learning. And this is going to continue. More and more, we're going to see tools that are going to come and they're going to use the GPU for compute purposes. No longer will it just be 3D rendering. We're going to get more that's going to touch base on that and more that's going to dig into the GPU, causing a need for greater resources. This will expand the overall functionality of ArcGIS Pro in the future. So because of these advances and the continued need to find greater capacities to support our software, we keep looking at these different providers and we crunch data, we run tests routinely against these different product lines. We stay in contact with the different vendors and we try to find the best solutions, and then we blog about them or we put them on the system requirements page or a combination of. Ultimately, the goal is to be able to give you, the GIS users, the best capacity or the best ability to make a decision for your needs. This involves working with Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, Oracle Cloud, Google Cloud, on-prem vendors such as VMware, Citrix, Microsoft, and Nutanix. And again, on the line, we have someone from Nvidia who will speak a little bit more to graphics processors. But we also work with AMD and AMD with their newer releases and getting out new products. Again, finding the best combination of these that can give the best overall user experience. So in this slide, we see a series of solutions we have and we continue to test. These virtualized environments offer some of the best technologies to support the Azure user community. Again, we have solutions from the cloud as well as on-prem. With technology powered by Nvidia, AMD, connectivity through PC over IP, RDP, etc. Services that are pay-as-you-go, and some that are more in the mindset of being able to configure something, and as I like to call it, the choose-your-own-adventure approach, build it out and have it do what you need it to do. From these paid services, you get instance options like AppStream, which we'll speak to, or Seth will speak to in a little while. That product is a little bit different in the sense that it presents an application that is fully backed by a VDI into an HTML5 web screen. That's very convenient. And the conveniences really come down to, I don't have to have a full powered desktop. I don't have to have, I'll have a really high powered laptop. I can work with a Chromebook. I can work with my home laptop that I bought at Best Buy for $200 in the open bin. I can use a tablet. I can use an iPad. And again, those choose your own adventures come in where maybe we're looking at something much larger like the Oracle Cloud and looking at those bare metal machines that have a lot of resources built into something that you now connect to. So I'd like to bring Emily in. Emily's going to speak to a little bit more about the experiences and the work with the Nvidia GPUs and explain how GPUs function. Emily? Emily, if you're on mute, there you go.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for the opportunity to present today. While this webinar focused primarily on cloud-hosted virtualization, it's important to keep in mind that NVIDIA can bring the same Quadro performance into your on-prem data centers as well. This Quadro experience has the flexibility to be anywhere because it essentially uses the same NVIDIA Quadro graphics drivers that are deployed in non-virtualized system and can offer the same breakthrough performance that the physical workstation offers. So that's what this slide just speaks to. We can go to the next slide where we can spend a little time talking about how virtual GPU technology works, as well as how different a virtual GPU enabled VDI environment is compared to CPU only. So on the left-hand side shows a traditional virtualized environment powered by CPU only. The virtualization layer, which is the hypervisor, is installed on the server, and the hypervisor abstracts the underlying hardware, making it accessible to multiple virtual desktops or VMs running in a virtualized host. When a user is working on a virtualized desktop, all the graphics commands from that virtualized desktop or software application are intercepted by a generic driver within the guest OS, and then they're passed down to the hypervisor to be captured and rendered on CPU only. This drives up CPU consumption on the server, can lower the amount of users that can be hosted on that server, and lessen the user experience. On the right-hand side is the Nvidia virtual GPU enabled VDI environment. Here we have GPUs installed on the server, and the Nvidia virtualization software is installed on the host server. This software enables the VMs to use the GPU, or if there are multiple GPUs in the server, they can be aggregated so that a single VM can access multiple GPUs. In the VM itself, there are drivers that are installed. These are called vGPU drivers, and they pertain to the different vGPU license levels that are available. For ArcGIS Pro, the QDWS license, it provides the Quadro license, the Quadro driver. This GPU-enabled environment not only provides a better user experience, but it also enables supporting more users per server, because the work that's typically done on the CPU can be then offloaded to the GPU. So that's an overview of how GPU versus CPU only environment looks. This next slide, Ryan will go into some AWS cloud service offerings.
Thanks, Emily. So with this, we have Amazon, and Amazon with all of their wide range of options. So we have workspaces. Workspaces you've seen if you've been to UC. We've had it at the virtualization island. These are NV6 powered machines. They give a great user experience. You get a full PC over IP client that you install on your machine and that you are able to open up and interact with this. This gives a very seamless approach, because once you get past the registration, you're pretty much doing a double click and then you jump into your cloud hosted environment. We have EC2s, EC2s with elastic graphics. What makes these different? An EC2, there's a wide range of options. It is really the encyclopedia of cloud hosted options that you're looking at. Depending on your need, you find high-end CPUs, lots of RAM. You could have a dedicated GPU with them on a G4. You could also have elastic graphics, and you're adding a GPU to an existing EC2, giving you user experience. And it's also worth noting that the EC2 with elastic graphics, that is the back end. That is what supports the next product, which is AppStream. So AppStream is, again, that HTML5 browser approach where you are going through, you have a managed service, you create a VM. The VM is an EC2 on the back end, but you're not seeing it in the same capacity as you do with the EC2, because it creates it through an administrator screen. You interact with it, and then you're going to publish applications that you install on this EC2 that are going to then be presented inside of the browser. So again, applications on a VDI presented into the browser. So ArcGIS Pro working for you inside of a browser. With these EC2s though, I want to bring up one other one with that. The G4 is one of the latest ones, and Emily's going to speak to that a little bit. We've seen a lot of really neat stuff from that one. It's really an interesting new addition that we've just recently started testing, but we've seen it able to handle ArcGIS Pro, City Engine, including our deep learning seminars that we've had a few people work with. Emily, can you tell us a little bit more about the G4 and the other GPUs, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. If you want to, yeah, thank you. So this next slide goes over the AWS offerings. So that the G4 is the one that Ryan was just speaking of, and it features the T4. And the T4 is our most current GPU architecture, which is called Turing. And the T4 is a great card because it allows for multiple diverse workflows to be executed. It offers great software acceleration. So 3D rendering, for example, and intense compute operations like deep learning. There's a tool within ArcGIS Pro called Detect Objects using deep learning, which will, it runs very nicely on the T4. So there are other GPU offerings as well on AWS listed on the lower portion of this slide. We have the Nvidia V100. The V100 offers a little bit more of a performance boost over the T4. It's really used heavily for compute operations, intense compute operations like deep learning training. And then there's also the K80 and the M60. So the M60 is an older architecture card based upon Maxwell. And then even further older generation is the K series, which is the Kepler generation series, and that's the K80 entry-level compute card on AWS. I think, Ryan, you've already spoke about the chance that you got to use the T4. So I think we can go on.
It's been really good for us so far. I mean, it's being able to use it and be able to run deep learning classes was kind of a real nice treat. But the other one was actually being able to run City Engine on top of that, beyond just being able to run ArcGIS Pro. So far that's proving to be a pretty solid platform for us. And to everybody out there, you can look forward to probably seeing more information on that in the future as we finish up a blog for that. So
that's great to hear. I'm glad that you had some success running those instances. The T4 is a great card. So the next slide here is a slide that I put together for some quick start NVIDIA resources that are out there, which users can refer to after this presentation. There's an instructional video, a quick start guide specific to AWS. And another thing I wanted to keep in mind is that we talked about licensing previously. So when you're working on AWS, there's no additional cost for NVIDIA Quadro drivers since the QDWS licensing is included. And then we also have NVIDIA power backed AppStream instances. These are called the Graphics Pro GPU, Graphics Pro, which are GPU powered streaming instances and can stream ArcGIS Pro as well.
Thanks, Emily. So let's go into Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure has as well multiple options and offerings out there that you're able to use. The NV6, if you've been to one of our islands at either UC or the Dev Summit, that's one we've actually shown multiple times as well. The NV6 is one of their M60 powered machines, and unlike in the Amazon environment, the Azure systems, we just use RDP and we get a great experience. You can use another client. You could use the Teradici client. You could use even the client that Amazon now owns, the nice DCV client. That either of those will give you that maybe a little crisper of a presentation, but overall we never saw a real reason for that. Once the performance for RDP became so much more solid, we see smooth rendering, we see actual ease of interaction and no delay in that. We have 4 separate offerings. The NC6, now the NC6 is a compute option. The compute option has been actually a solid platform for us. We've used that for deep learning classes. The NC6 again is a K80 backbone, also a V100. That did limit us a little bit on being able to do one or the other. We had to choose between compute or visualization. So this didn't work as great in some cases on being able to do visualization, but all the other functionality was so strong that it was a very good use for deep learning classes. And speaking of deep learning, the ND series, which we've worked with a bit, it's a bit expensive, but it's a very solid platform. You're on a P40 that's able to do both compute and visualization. So that system is very good to be able to give you that overall presentation, that overall capacity. But I want to spend some time speaking a little bit more about the NVV4. So the NVV4 is the latest option that we've gotten from Azure. So this is something a little bit different. Most of those systems that we've talked about from the Azure platform have been focused with and using the Nvidia software stack and the Nvidia hardware. The NVV4 has several options here. We have an NV4, which is going to give you a quarter of a GPU. We have an NV8, which is going to, or I guess I'll break this down a little bit differently. You got 2 gigs of it, so you got a 1/8 GPU. The NV8 gives you the quarter. That's 4 gigs of frame buffer. The NV16, you've got your 8. You're getting half that GPU. And then on the NV32, you're getting the full 16 gigabytes of this GPU. AMD came up with a newer processor. You have the EPYC or the Rome platform. This is specifically, they've got set up in Azure at the moment. You've got 32 cores at 2.46 gigahertz clock speed. This makes for a very strong compute and a very reliable experience, especially when running geoprocessing analytics. The fractionalized GPU gives you a flexibility. You don't necessarily have to have the full thing, which also means you don't have to pay for the whole thing. With this, you get a little bit more ability to carve out what you want if you're an Amazon or if you're an Azure user, and you're able to fine tune those needs and keep prices more under control. That's a very unique flexibility for this platform. And what does this platform really do for everybody? Well, let's explain how I categorize these 4 different options. In NV4, the NV4, so the 4 CPU, 2 gigabytes of frame buffer, gives you plenty of RAM with 14 gigs of RAM. But what it also gives you the ability to do is have a light user out there. This works very well with our 2-dimensional knowledge workers, ArcMap users, or just 2D ArcGIS Pro users. I wouldn't want to put too much more into that system. I would want to move people up as they were starting to get busier or handling bigger and bigger projects. The NV8 is going to give you another option to start working with heavier workloads and get even some 3D capacity in there. It's got the frame buffer for it. It's got the ability to do it. But that's where the next platform, the NV16, this is going to be for our high-end users. So we've gone from light user to medium user, and now we're going into a high-end user. This is somebody who's going to be working with 3D. They're going to be taking on big projects, and they're going to be gobbling up more and more information to give bigger presentations or to work on maybe buildingscapes, cityscapes, and beyond. And maybe if they need even a little bit more than that, then you go into the NV32. You've got really an awful lot of capacity hosted out there with this platform. So this is a real fantastic way to get our ArcGIS Pro users on a Windows 10 platform from Microsoft Azure and be able to get lots of work going on from that. But it also has a slightly lower cost point in some cases versus other Microsoft offerings. So it's really worth your consideration if you want to test a platform that has a flexibility to bring all of your users in at different phases and then be able to control some of those costs. Currently, it's available in their South Central US locations, East US, and also in West Europe. So I expect them to bring that on a little bit more across the board to other data centers as well, depending on need. So, Emily, can you explain some of the GPU offerings in the way that Nvidia has it for the different platforms?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Ryan. So, of course, there are a variety of NVIDIA GPU accelerated virtual machines offerings on Azure. These offerings are not fractionalized, whether the user gets access to the entire GPU for application acceleration. And there are two ways that you can access GPU accelerated workstations. You can either bring your own license, which then you have to set up manually, or you can use the Azure Marketplace, where there's an NVIDIA managed instance that's always up to date with the latest drivers and optimizations. So the P40 is the ND series, and as Brian mentioned, this is a great option for if you need to have visualization, like 3D visualization of 3D mapping, as well as a user that needs to execute some deep learning or intense compute operations. The M60 is also out there in the NV series. The M60 is a older generational card to the P40. So P40 is based on Pascal, and M60 is based on the Maxwell generational, architecture. So, but the M60 is also a great card. It's I've used it for many, many years. It's great for remote visualization workloads. But it doesn't have the compute deep learning compute capacity as the P40 does. Ryan, I know that you've had the chance to use some of these instances. What's your feedback?
So with these, we do get a lot of use for the NV6. So we've got the M60 in this case. Again, like you said, it's been really reliable over the years, and it's really capable. The ND series, we've only touched base on that a little bit. It's really the P40 probably that handles most of that workload, and the virtualization island was powered by the P40 for a year and a half, 2 years ago. So that was what we were using and showcasing before we switched for our on-premise usage. But yeah, there's a lot of flexibility inside of the Azure platform. So
that's great to hear. Thanks. This next slide, I just wanted to provide the same type of resources that I provided earlier for AWS as for Azure. So again, we have NVIDIA has some quick start guides out there, instructional video, as well as a just a quick start guide to get you up and running quickly. So the overall, the ND series instances had the P40 on it, and it has the QDWS. The NV instances have the M60, and you can either work in a virtual desktop or virtual workstation environment. And I think the next slide goes into some other options that Ryan will go into.
So let's talk about two other offerings here. We have Oracle Cloud and we have the Google Cloud. First, let me start on the Oracle side of it. Make no mistake on this one. It is a very robust option. You're getting bare metal instances in the cloud. This is a little bit different than your EC2s, your Azure environments. You're getting actual physical hardware that you can access from the cloud much differently. So it's much more that you are getting a full server that's going to be placed out there that you have access and that you can control. If you want to add components to it, you want to spin up your own VMs on it, you can put a hypervisor on there and you can do that. These are very, very big machines. You could almost say you get a handful of these things, you got your full hosted infrastructure replicated in the cloud now. And it is a little bit different. It can be unique. It can be a little more challenging in some cases, but the functionality is really, really strong. So you have two instances that I've listed here, and this is the VM GPU 2.1 and the bare metal for VM GPU 2.2. Those two options are what I tested with and worked with. Again, this is very high end of what you're working with. You're getting a P100 or a V100 to back this. That you can break that apart a little bit if you install the drivers, and you can get more out of these. But the fact that you can put that in there, you can put deep learning workloads out there, you can put ArcGIS Pro and have an amazing experience, and all you're doing is connecting like you would to any other machine using RDP. So let's talk about the Google Cloud. And the Google Cloud was the first one I'd seen out there that had offered the T4. I think that was early 2019. But Emily's going to take that a little bit and speak to the Google environment as well right now. Emily?
So yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yeah, you're right. Google Cloud was the first cloud service provider to offer the T4 early 2019. And as I mentioned, the T4, so just to go into it a little bit more, why we get so excited about the T4. The T4, I guess it's considered the industry-leading GPU, and it's based upon, as I mentioned earlier, the latest Turing architecture. The T4 is really unique because it's about the same size as your iPhone. It's considered a single slot card, and it's very energy efficient. It only draws a max of 70 watts of power. And this, since it's highly efficient design, it can reduce the operating costs for cloud service providers, but it offers the flexibility to scale up. So you can put actually 8 T4s in a single server, depending on the type of server, of course. So it's quite a cool card, and it offers some very groundbreaking performance because it has both tensor and RT cores. And so it does really well for diverse workflows like 3D map visualization and executing deep learning. It's also very well priced, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But I don't want to, discount the other GCP offerings that are out there. So there is other offerings. So there's the Nvidia V100, which will give you a little bit more of a performance boost over the T4. It's great for if you're doing a lot of deep learning training. V1, and it also offers double precision. The predecessor to the V100 is the P100, which is also offered on Google Cloud. And the predecessor to the T4 is the P4. So as you can see, that's also being offered on the Google Cloud. They do have the K80. The K80 is great. It's a compute card used for machine learning, inferencing, training, and some HPC workloads, which GIS users could be considered some HPC, but it doesn't have the graphics driver, it doesn't have the ability to do graphics visualization, so 3D graphics. The next slide here, I wanted to just give a URL because I think it's worthy of noting that earlier this year, Google drastically reduced the price of their T4 Google Cloud instance, more than 60% actually, making it the lowest cost GPU instance on Google Cloud. So that's worth mentioning. The T4 I mentioned has RT cores, which is really good for RTX workflows. So RTX workflows it implements ray tracing for materials. Right now, Azure software doesn't have ray tracing inside of their software, but if your users are using multiple applications in the cloud, that might be something that you may want to consider, that it does support RTX. And if you really want to learn more about RTX, you can Google RTX on, off, and Minecraft, and it will really show you the difference between what is RTX. That I sidetracked, but it's a good little thing to look at. But I also provided these quick start guides similar to what I did for Azure and AWS. Again, we have that instructional video and some guides to help you get started pretty quickly. So back to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Emily. And yes, the Minecraft video is quite fun to watch. My son had a great time with that. So we're going to speak a little bit about the managed service providers, and John's going to go ahead and speak to this a little bit.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so all the previous slides talked about standing up your own infrastructure in the cloud. There are other options to standing up your own infrastructure and putting Pro up there, because the entire presentation is on how to deploy Pro in the cloud. And there are companies, managed service providers, that will help you do that. They will expedite it. Their whole job in business is to help you easily to get your workload, including ArcGIS Pro, into the cloud. And a couple of the companies, one that I've worked with for a long time is Rock Technologies. And Rock Technologies, they're very good at this. If you go to their website, you'll see that they work with the ArcGIS technology stack. They're used to it, and they can help you with Pro. Same with Cloudalize, and Cloudalize is really big in Western Europe. And then we have another partner, WorkSpot, and then of course there's Frame. Frame was one of the first times where we saw ArcGIS Pro in a browser from the cloud. So those are some other options to consider, are the managed service providers. Okay, Ryan.
Thanks, John. Seth, we have Seth Sperry here, who from Virginia Tech has been dealing and actually in the front line of having to be able to bring users the ability to connect to resources in this work from home environment. So Seth's going to speak to this a little bit and his experiences using AppStream. Seth, can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Thanks, Ryan.
Whoop.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
So I'd like to thank Esri for inviting me to participate, all of you out there for joining. I'm the Senior GIS Architect at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. I manage our university's enterprise GIS, and that's part of our central IT organization. Our objective is to lower all the technical barriers to the use of geospatial data, maps, services, and apps across all the disciplines in our business units. We are very heavily involved in cloud technologies. We use ArcGIS Online, software as a service, AWS platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service using our OpenStack implementation online, on premises. Next slide. So just to give you an idea of kind of where we are today, we have been experimenting with AWS AppStream for a pilot project with our university libraries, but when the university announced they would go fully online for the remainder of the spring term, the Division of IT had to very quickly respond to support this new reality. For our part, we very rapidly ramped up our AppStream presence with the intention of supporting students and faculty all working from home. We were certainly building the plane while we were flying it. Now, what I want to emphasize for you guys is two things, really. One, this is a work in progress. I don't have all the answers, and the things that I'll tell you today worked for us, but that does not necessarily qualify them as best practice. The other thing is you can do this too, because we're using a configuration that's mostly out of the box. Our auth-in is using user pool identities and streaming URLs. Persistent storage is S3. And there's many advanced things that we could do that we haven't done yet. Point being, this is a pretty standard configuration. It's very accessible. Next slide. So how does this compare to the other virtualization technologies you guys have heard about today? And the first thing I should probably qualify this with is that Esri does recommend using ArcGIS Online software as a service if your workloads will let you do that. Of course, if you can meet all your existing needs with online, you probably aren't interested so much in this webinar, because if you're here, you probably need Pro. So AppStream puts ArcGIS Pro into the hands of your users faster and with a more simplified configuration experience than other virtualization options. With AppStream, your users are going to be running ArcGIS Pro in a web browser. They are not getting a full desktop. So in some ways, this is apples and oranges with what you've heard about today so far. But if this is all you need, and it's going to do everything your end users require, then AppStream is going to give you the benefit of virtualization without having to manage that virtualization layer yourself. You don't have to be in the business of managing the technical intricacies of the virtualization under the hood. Next. Now, I believe AppStream may be the fastest and cheapest way to deliver an acceptable virtualized ArcGIS Pro experience at scale. I certainly think it's the best way to do it if your organization has to go fully remote in 1 week. A major benefit to this is the convenience. You can stand this up very quickly without managing the virtualization layer. Your end users are going to get an experience that's similar to a clean install on local hardware. If they want persistent data, they can use S3 for that, or they can rely entirely on the portal. And I think this really illustrates the power of the WebGIS pattern, because in this model, ArcGIS Pro kind of becomes an extension of the portal, just has more buttons and knobs. So your entire GIS effectively is in the cloud with this implementation pattern. Downsides, of course, you don't get a full desktop. You're not going to be integrated with your single sign-on or your local storage or network attached storage. You're going to have to physically upload stuff into S3 if you need to access something that's not in your organization's portal. And there's a little bit of a learning curve for both your users and your administrators. But I'll show you kind of some of the things we've encountered later on. For now, let's take a look at that user experience. So when your users are given a URL to access your AppStream infrastructure by your administrators, there's really a couple of different paths through which that can happen. And you kind of have that choice as the administrator. If you have users that are going to be accessing the platform on a regular basis, then you're going to want to create persistent identities for them, and that's the user pool. So when they get a URL to access AppStream, they'll be given a login page. If you just want to let people try this out for a time period of up to 1 week, then you can give them a streaming URL. Maybe you have a class that only needs ArcGIS Pro for 1 lab or something like that. So you can create streaming URLs for everybody. They don't even have to log in. They go directly to that second screen, which is your app selection. Now, interestingly, a couple things here. It's possible to provision multiple apps inside of AppStream. So you wouldn't just necessarily have to have Pro here. You could have Pro, you could have City Engine, maybe some other applications that your users might need for whatever it is they're doing, and then they can switch between them later. The other thing is, if you are using streaming URLs, if 2 users use the same streaming URL, not only do they share the same storage bucket, but they literally share the same session. And so it's kind of like 2 people trying to edit a Google Doc at the same time. But once the app has been selected, an instance will be provisioned. There's about a 2-minute wait, and off you go. Next slide. So users will begin by logging into their portal as they would with a local install. And as I said here, the WebGIS pattern really saves the day for making this such a wonderful, usable technology, because all of your maps and your apps and your layers are that would be available to you in online are immediately available to you here as well. They select a project, and then you see your ArcGIS Pro interface. Next slide. Now, the screen real estate is divided into the ArcGIS Pro user interface and sort of a toolbar of controls. It's actually kind of easy to miss if you're not paying attention because of the light gray color that it's drawn in here. But these controls we'll talk about in a minute here. The point I want to make here is, wow, ArcGIS Pro is really usable, really responsive in AppStream. Now, we were using the stream.graphicsdesign.large instance type for this. That's the smallest instance type that ArcGIS Pro can comfortably run under that has graphics capabilities. We did this because we wanted to provision more instances as opposed to high horsepower instances. Now, if you were targeting workflows that were more analysis and processing oriented, you might want to choose a graphics design X large. In our case, we were replicating workflows like labs and class projects and things where they're doing basic desktop cartography. So the large size was enough. And really, I'd say the end user's last mile internet is probably going to be your bottleneck more so than the processing power of your instances. And that would pretty much be true of any other work from home technology even this webinar. So let's take a little bit more closer look at the toolbar. So here you can manage your session. You can manage the integration between your local and remote clipboard, your instance settings. You can log out of your session when done. You can switch between apps if you have other things besides Pro currently running in AppStream. But the thing I want to point out here, this maroon box is My Files. This is the integration with S3 that allows you to have a home directory. So if you're going to work with content that portal, then using the screen on the right of the maroon box, you would upload that to S3, or your users would, and then the screenshot on the left, I'm sorry, I've got my left and right mixed up. The one on the left is the upload screen, and then the one on the right is how it looks in ArcGIS Pro. It's available for use. Next slide. So cost is going to be very variable based on how you set your scaling parameters. As a general rule of thumb, we found that a graphics design .large left on for 24/7, which would be like, this is my desired capacity of, in this case it was desired capacity of 2 during testing. And so if we left that on, we were finding that was about $25 per instance left on 24/7 per month. But this is really, I guess, it shines when you're trying to meet burst capacity with it. So it might be the case that you need 50 instances, but you only need them for a couple of days. And so really that's where this very elastic capability for scaling in and out really makes this an attractive option for temporary workloads. And again, your mileage will vary here, and AWS has a pricing calculator if you want to game out some scenarios. Last slide. So this is not a deep dive into the system administration of how to set this up. Esri has a very good PDF deployment guide that we used to build our implementation. I just wanted to kind of briefly summarize how one might go about doing this in case you are the person in your organization tagged with implementing AppStream for ArcGIS Pro. So in the blue box, you see that there's certain tasks that you have to do to start this up, to create your images, configure them, and so forth. After you go live, there are ongoing activities. That's the tan box there. What I want to point out is this is not the same skill set, not the same set of tasks, same character of work really as managing a virtualized infrastructure under the hood. It does require one to be familiar with how AWS works with auto scaling and system limits and the AppStream's authentication scheme. But the thing to remember here is you're not incurring the overhead of carrying and feeding operating systems. You're going to rebuild your images whenever you need to make a change to them. You'll be spending most of your time adjusting your capacity, really, managing your scale, and provisioning users as people decide that they want to use this platform. So to summarize everything I've said here today, AppStream is a very convenient way to quickly and cheaply deliver virtualized ArcGIS Pro to your users. This is something that you can replicate yourself, even if you don't have a technical background in virtualization, because it is a fully managed service. And ArcGIS Pro is responsive and very usable over AppStream. So with that, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it. Like the candor. So we've spoken about various cloud platforms, lots of hardware that's involved with making all of these function, and spoken briefly about some other options that are out there as far as doing a remote connection to the workplace, or to having used something like Parallels on a MacBook. I've got some more resources for you that'll be a part of this. You'll see different links to different blogs, some of the different pricing model information, as well as some of the setup information. If you have additional questions that come up, you can always reach out to us, and we will We will get your answer as best we can, or we'll try and get you directed to the right people in some cases. So with that in mind, I'm going to open this up for some questions, and I've seen several inside of the chat. So let's get a few of these real quick here. I saw some questioning about referencing pricing on several cases here. And there's a lot of information out there for pricing. So in a case of let's start with the NVV4s since they're kind of new. The NVV4s start at 29 cents per hour and work their way all the way up to $2.33 per hour. In the middle with the NV8 and 16, you're looking at around 60 cents per hour to run one of those systems. And a G4 instance on Amazon, you'd be looking at roughly around $15 a day. So they're between, it starts at 53 cents per hour. And depending on storage and some of the other configurations, you run up closer to 70 cents is what I've noticed. Let's see.
Yeah, Ryan, this is John. One important thing to notice, those prices are what you see on the website. That's kind of your rack rate. Most of the companies and organizations that will start to use this, you already have your contract set up, and your costs will be different. Odds are they'll be slightly reduced from that. So keep that in mind. Those are just what you see online, those prices.
See, I see another one. How does Esri recommend smaller organizations get started with virtualizing ArcGIS Pro if they don't have a dedicated IT department or developer? Well, that's a good question. And I think Seth actually helped answer some of that too. With a product like AppStream, we do have documentation that's out there. If you can follow some of that documentation or you have access to a cloud-hosted vendor, a lot of that can be set up from a single pane of glass approach. You can open up the web browser, and as long as you have an account inside of that, you're able to then select and create instances. There may be some growing pains with that if you have never done it before, because you're going to have to set different components up, and without going too deep into that, there's things like VPCs that you're going to have to configure, different network connectivity. But you can get yourself up and running for the most part with most of the information that's out there online. And as Esri customers, you can reach out to us and we can help you out with that as well. Let's see, I saw another one here. Oh, this is someone saying they weren't able to answer the poll question. Sorry about that. And let's see, did Esri test the Azure NVV4 with Azure Windows Virtual Desktop? We didn't do that part with Windows Virtual Desktop. We did the straight VM with that system. And question here is, are there alternatives to similar to AppStream inside of the Azure environment? Not at this time.
But Ryan, that is something that we're hoping to see in the Azure environment soon. So
yeah, it definitely is. I would assume we probably will see something soon, but as it stands right now,
we don't know.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about that quite a bit.
We've been using in-house servers running Nvidia Titan x2 cards, utilizing 1 GB internet connections to local high speed and solid state storage. This seems to work out much cheaper than using Azure or Amazon. Okay.
That's great to hear.
Is there a volume-based storage fee for the S3 environment, or is it free with AppStream subscription? Depending on there's components to that. So when you do set up an AppStream environment, you are given S3 storage. that is part of your agreement that you have set up with that. Could that go beyond that? Yeah, you could end up in, if you have other S3 buckets that you've configured and that you're trying to access, yes, you would be paying on those.
Can I just add one thing there, Ryan?
Yeah.
So the total associated with AppStream that actually gets tagged with AppStream in your AWS billing doesn't always tell you the whole story, because there are certain components like VPCs that cost money themselves to operate. And so I'm wanting to say it's like $30 a month or something like that for the VPC. User S3 buckets, which it's a very cost-effective form of storage to begin with, but you might notice a few dollars or so for user storage that isn't associated with the AppStream's internally managed S3 buckets that get bundled into that dollar figure itself. Certainly the main driver, though, of the cost that AppStream is going to present to your organization is going to be the number of instances that you keep running.
Thanks, Seth. I have another question here where it's, oh, tell me where I can download ArcGIS Pro. If you go onto the Esri website and type in ArcGIS Pro, do a search for free trial, and that will get you to the page that will give you an option to sign up for a free trial, and you will be able to download the software from there once you're set up. If you already have an org account, that is also available to you already. So I see a question here. On AWS EC2 G4 instances, what would be the best instance type for 4 users, i.e. extra large or 2x large? Well, if you're talking about logging in multiple users into one instance, it's not necessarily the way we suggest going forward with it. It would be to get individual users, and the X-Large does just fine for that. And I think, again, it costs you starting around 53 cents per hour to run that. If you run multiple connections to that, you'll be kind of going at your own on that one. I don't know fully how that kind of performance will be handled with that at this time.
Yeah, so to clarify or to add some more content to that question, we normally don't recommend users having multiple users log into the same instance or the same OS instance. What we do recommend is having each one of those users to have their own Windows operating system, the full desktop, or like an AppStream instance. So that is what's recommended. If you're looking at sharing an instance because of cost, I would look at some of the other options and some of the other instance types that have reduced costs.
Let's see. Oh, hang on a second. I think we have one here. This may be a question for you, John. As Pro gets further developed, which would mean the need for greater resources, do you think GIS on a desktop, as my screen moves, there it is, as GIS on a desktop will become obsolete in the near future?
Let me kind of repeat it, Ryan, to see if I got it.
Yeah.
Well, can you repeat it?
Let me
please?
repeat it because my screen started guiding along here. As Pro
Okay.
gets further developed, which would mean the need for greater resources, do you think GIS on a desktop will become obsolete in the near future?
Okay. No, I don't. and that's clear. ArcGIS Pro, we continuously just put more capability, more GIS functionality into it. And you're going to have GIS analysts working on a Windows desktop environment for a very long time. We anticipate ArcGIS Pro to deliver all that GIS capability, all that spatial analytical horsepower to the Windows desktop for a while. It will start to consume and need more and more GPU capability, as not only to handle the visualization part, but the increased compute, because we're putting in a lot of GPU acceleration to, like, our GP tools, the spatial analytics. They're being accelerated. You know, we're using the CUDA libraries to make everything go faster. But for the foreseeable future, rest assured, it's going to be delivered on a Windows desktop.
The next question I see here, is there a white paper or similar resource that demonstrates the comparison of costs between virtualization versus traditional cost as a starting point for business justification of conversion? We did recently produce a white paper, and this white paper goes over the setting up and deployment capacity of getting ArcGIS Pro in a virtualized environment. As far as giving you cost justification would not necessarily be a part of that. That is going to be, again, as John mentioned, part of your contracts and part of what you already have in place with the different vendors. As far as what you get for hardware in virtualized environments, that's another component where as you go through those costs, depending on who you work with for your overall infrastructure deployment, that can depend on your pricing as well. So our white paper really focuses on what it takes to take ArcGIS Pro and put it in a virtualized environment and what those needs revolve around. Do you want to add anything to that, John?
No, I think that's it. You know, normally the cost, while it would be convenient to find something out there to help determine whether it's more cost efficient to have, you know, on-prem hardware and desktops or cloud, that probably already exists somewhere. We are just helping people who already know they need to go to the cloud. We are helping those folks to let them know how to do it. So, yeah.
I see a question in here. Where can I find the slides for this presentation? The slides will be uploaded to the blog site that was listed in the first slide or so, and that information will be there. So check back with that blog. I'll have the slides in a PDF format as well as the recording for this presentation uploaded as soon as I can. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Okay, let's see, we got one here. Do you have some guidance documentation specifically for local government users that might help them quantify their budget needs for the first year? Local government IT shops need to lock in on a price for a year of service several months before deployment. Do any of these vendors offer a fixed price for new deployments?
You know, I really think you have to, we don't know, or I don't know, but I think that'd be really good for you to contact both Amazon and Azure, Google and Oracle Cloud. You know, it also may be a really good idea for you to consider, for the person who asked that question, to consider not only to contact those cloud providers, but also one of the managed service providers, and ask those questions, because we don't have that information. We do work with all the vendors, but we really don't work a lot with the costs. So.
I have an interesting question here. Will UC 2020 give us the opportunity to experience these various instances of GIS IE using AppStream? I don't know. It's a great question. Normally we have the virtualization island in place, and we always strive to have more than just one option. On the virtualization island, we always get multiple VMs running ArcGIS Pro with different projects, so you can have a chance to touch and feel and experience a virtualized environment. Without exception, we always have other options. We've had a MacBook with Parallels in place. We've had Frame. We've had AppStream even last year on the island. If that were to go forward again this year, then we would have that same type of experience. I just don't know for sure.
You know, Ryan, what would be a good idea is if this year we could provide, that's something that'd be very interesting. It'd be really good to hear from those on the call to see if they would like to be able, as part of the UC, to be able to try out for short periods of time, maybe an hour or two, one of the virtualized environments that we talked about today. And if people think that'd be a great idea, you know, we could set it up, and then they could check out an instance maybe for 1 or 2 hours, try it out, and then give us some feedback.
Yeah, that's a good idea. You might be able to get some lab space. I see some yeses to that response. So
Okay.
yes,
Well,
it would be great to try out these virtualized environments at UC so we can see how it works best. So we will take that back as some good feedback, and we'll see what we can do. Let's see, are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions at the moment. Oh, we got one. ArcGIS Pro free trial is not included now in the web page to download. When will that be accessible? I believe the web page has a point that the free trials are being dispersed immediately to the essential areas related to COVID-19 issues. And that is a policy I don't have any influence over. I don't know exactly when that will change. That's, if you can put in your request, it should go through. It just might be in a queue for a while. I don't know for sure.
okay, Ryan.
All right. If you have additional questions, please feel free to email either myself, John Mesa, or you can hit the ArcGIS Pro Virtualization at esri.com. That goes to a group of us. I want to thank Emily. I want to thank you, Seth. Great presentations. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to any questions you guys may have.
Again, I will be posting this also to the blog site very, very soon. If you have a hard time finding it, you can search me on esri.com and you'll be able to find the blog that way. And it will get socialized here pretty soon as well.